Yes, your own country is always a good place to invest, but there are other people in other countries always doing well, and if you can find them, you will make some money.
Looking for a rally in the stock market, and optimism to come back to the market. But it seems like the Fed is trapped right now. A lot of investors are talking about that. So do you see that the Fed is going to be able to, have a soft landing here, and that's what's going to cause the market to rally? Or what exactly is going to cause the market to rally in this case?
Oh, I've heard about soft landings for most of my investment career. I don't remember one ever happening, except, in the news, in the newspapers or on the TV. I doubt if they'll pull off a soft landing, though. It's been since 2009 that we have not had a economic problem in the U.S. That's the longest in recorded history. Maybe it's going to go on forever, but we're certainly overdue on a historic basis. Um, and maybe these guys are geniuses and maybe they will pull it off. I doubt it. I would suspect we will have a hard landing sometime in the next year or so, and it will cause all of us to suffer and to suffer badly. And then they will print more money to try to save themselves, which means that real assets will be the place to be again. In the 70s, real assets were the place to be, and you could make a lot of money owning the right things in those times of horrible inflation. But back to what I said before, if there's peace in Ukraine, this is not a prediction, but if there is, that would mean oil will go down, grains will go down, and everybody will say, we've saved the day. So watch for something to happen to surprise all of us. And I don't know what it is.
Now, when it comes to investing in hard assets, precious metals specifically, we have a lot of viewers wanting to know your perspective on where the metals are right now. We have seen a decrease in the price, especially of silver, in the last few months. Now, you've been saying for a while that you're waiting for the prices to drop to buy more, possibly. Are you buying right now, or how low do you want the prices to fall to begin to purchase more?
No, I am still waiting. I'm delighted you remember that my approach. But I want to remind you, my market timing is not the place to be. You don't watch me. I don't know when I will buy. I don't have a price in mind. I presume the market will tell me when I see a lot of despair in the silver market or a big collapse or something like that. Then, of course, that would be the time to start buying silver again and gold. For instance, if there were peace in Ukraine and if grain prices had a big collapse and oil prices had a big collapse, silver and gold would go down too. And that would be my time to start buying again. But I have no idea how all this is going to work out. I'm still waiting. I still own all of my silver, all of my gold, but I'm not buying and have not been buying yet.
Now, John Hill is wanting to know about the impact that China and Russia's demand for precious metals is going to have on the prices. Your perspective on that?
China's got the largest population in the world, and they have been buying a lot of gold. I would suspect that if they and the Russia's been buying gold for many years. I suspect if they continue to buy and if things get bad, they have a lot of people and a lot of money. And yes, that is another demand factor in the gold and silver market. And of course, that will have a big effect, especially if they start buying in a big way. Yes. China's got huge amounts of money and a huge population.
Now, there's talk about, I believe, Russia introducing a new trading platform for precious metals that could compete with the LBMA. We have a few viewers' questions on that. What is your perspective on the possible new exchanges that may be popping up around the world? Do you see that to have any impact on the price as well for precious metals?
Well, it's just another place to buy and sell precious metals, and the more places, the better. And that leads to more demand eventually. Yes, it's a factor, but that's not, to me, it's not the determining factor in what's happening. Part of the reason for this is, more and more people are losing confidence in the U.S. dollar, and the U.S. is a place to do business because the U.S. keeps putting sanctions on people. If the U.S. doesn't like you, then they put sanctions on. Well, That's not the way the world's reserve currency is supposed to work. If you have an international medium of exchange, it's supposed to be neutral. Anybody can use it for anything. But Washington has changed and is changing those rules so that they don't like you. They say you can't use the US dollar. So many people are starting to look for something to compete with the US dollar. I don't particularly like this. I'm an American too, but I can see the facts of what's happening. And people say, well, wait a minute. I mean, even our friends are starting to say, wait a minute, they might yank it out from under us. So that is a reason you're seeing these new markets develop, is because people are worried about doing business in the US or in US dollars. And I can't say I blame them.
No, that's a very good point. And really, ever since the sanctions on Russia, and we've seen the Russia-Ukraine war, ever since we've seen an acceleration of de-dollarization around the world, countries moving away from the dollar, the BRICS nations talking about creating a new new reserve currency. Your perspective on that, if you could expand on countries moving away from the U.S. dollar and how that will impact the U.S. dollar.
Well, the U.S. dollar has been on top for 100 years or so, which is about the most international mediums of exchange or reserve currencies last, say, 100 years. There's no magic to the number, but that's what history shows. So we're getting to be overdue on a time basis. But more important than that, we are the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, Elijah. Again, I don't like saying any of this, but facts are facts. No country has ever been as deeply in debt as we are. It's getting worse every week, every day in Washington. And so many people, for fundamental reasons, are looking to find something to compete with the US dollar. And then I've mentioned the political reasons that people are scared that Washington might stab them in the back. And so, no, it's happening. Again, historically, it always happens. Historically, it is happening. But we, Washington, are making it accelerate with our own actions.
And you've talked about for a while about also investing outside of the U.S. You yourself moved to Singapore to really have your daughters learn Chinese, is my understanding, and really be immersed in that country and culture. Your perspective then on really investing outside of the U.S. We have a question here. I know you've recently invested in Uzbekistan, and Michael is wanting to know what type of business are you interested in right now in Uzbekistan?
Well, we did move to Singapore because in my children's lifetime, Asia is going to be extremely important, and the Chinese language is going to be extremely important. So I wanted to prepare them for the 21st century. You can ask me in 40 years if it was a good decision or not. But so far, my children do speak great Chinese, and they can use chopsticks, et cetera, et cetera. We will see if that's a wise decision. That's my only reason for moving here. I wouldn't live here otherwise. Although it is a wonderful place to be, I might add. No, I see that Asia has certainly got a good future. If you look around the world, the large debtor nations are not in Asia. I mean, Japan's a big debtor nation, but most other nations are not huge debtors. So the fundamentals are better here. The population is in Asia, whether we like it or not. And this may be an area of the future. I hope so, at least for my children's sake, and we will see someday. But there are many places outside the U.S. to invest. I mean, throughout history, many successful people have invested outside of their own country. At one time, 150 years ago, Europeans invested in the U.S. We skint them, many of them ran away, said, oh my gosh, those people are outlaws, those are crooks. But many people have invested outside their own country throughout history, and that has led to many opportunities, and it always will. Yes, your own country is always a good place to invest, but there are other people in other countries always doing well, and if you can find them, you will make some money.
to recognize the trends, which you often are very good at. And that kind of brings us to this next topic of the Fed and inflation. We're seeing this trend of inflation right now, and people are wanting to know, how do we invest in this environment? So first, if we could get your general take on why we're seeing such inflation right now and where you see that headed in the future, and how do we invest accordingly with inflation in sight?
Whenever there's inflation, prices go higher, and if you own the things that go higher in price, you will do okay, and you might even make a lot of money. I mean, there were people that made a lot of money in the 1970s when there was terrible inflation, and the Fed once again was out of control. So if you own the right things, you'll make a lot of money during this period. And usually during inflation, the prices of real assets go higher, whether it's silver or wheat or whatever, something that's real, mainly commodities. And commodities are certainly the most depressed asset class right now around the world. You will probably do okay.
And when it comes to that, your perspective then on the bond market, because that also has to do with inflation. We have a viewer here asking, the bond market is predicting inflation will come down sharply by the next year. Does the bond market have it right? Or if not, will this send bond market prices lower? What's the relationship with the DXY, the dollar index, and the gold relationship in this environment as well? So kind of a lot of questions there, but your take on bonds, the US dollar, and gold.
So the bonds, the dollar, and precious metals, we only have one day, don't we? That's a whole lot to discuss. Well, I own silver and gold. I'm not buying at the moment. I plan to buy more of both as we go along, especially silver, since it's cheaper these days because of inflation, and there will be worse inflation. The reason we have inflation is because the central bank in the U.S., but not just the U.S., but especially the U.S., printed huge amounts of money. You have to understand, Elijah, these guys are bureaucrats. They're academics. They don't know what they're doing. All they want to do is keep their job. They don't particularly care about you or your job. They don't know what they're doing. As you know, a few months ago, they said, oh, there is no inflation. Then they said, oh, it's transitory, don't worry. And now they say, we got it under control. I mean, please, go back and read the history of the central bank in the U.S. and the world, not just the U.S. We've only had one or two good central bankers in American history. We certainly don't have one now. We certainly haven't had one in a while. So they don't know what they're doing, and that's why we have inflation. Yes, they say they're now cutting back, and I hope they do. But my view is that something might happen, and then they will let up. They will really, if there's peace in Ukraine, for instance, oil prices and grain prices will continue to go down, and the central bank will say, "See, we solved the problem. We saved the day," and we'll have a big rally in stocks and bonds. But that will be the last rally. And yes, your viewer points out that bonds are doing better. Well, first of all, nothing goes straight up or straight down, and bonds are having a big rally after having had a big correction. So I don't let the bond market tell me too much about what to do with my investments, but I certainly watch the bond market, and certainly the bond market is smarter than most of us.